The galaxies shimmer with the quiet hum of consensus, a delicate equilibrium held together by centuries of treaties, trade, and coercion. Yet on the third planet from Sol, the silence had deepened, not with peace, but with purpose. Earth had gone quiet, not a silence of diplomacy or withdrawal, but something colder, more deliberate. Commander V. Loren watched the planet from his observation deck aboard the Manthais, the Empire's flagship in Sol Sector. The blue orb hovered beneath him, familiar and suddenly unknowable. Long-range scans showed no orbital chatter, no open comms, no trade pings. Just Earth, humming with power in ways the Empire couldn't quite interpret. "They're not hiding," Emissary RHYX murmured, joining him by the viewport. The emissary's translucent robes caught the artificial starlight. "They're preparing." "For what?" V. Loren asked, though he feared the answer. The humans had always been different. Adaptable, unpredictable, disobedient in subtle, lethal ways. "You already know," RHYX replied, voice layered with sadness. "You felt it in the council chamber." Yes, V. Loren had felt it. The moment when humanity stopped speaking in futures and started withdrawing into a now so full of meaning, it left no room for the Empire. The last meeting with Earth's ambassador had ended without a farewell. No threats, no accusations, just a cold, professional silence. The ambassador, Lilo Okoye, a former physicist-turned-negotiator, had looked V. Loren in the eye and said, "We have reviewed our options. We decline to remain." That was 2 standard weeks ago. Since then, human colonies had gone dark one by one, pulling data, decommissioning Empire systems, evacuating stations in near-perfect synchronization. There was no panic, just a steady, relentless movement of a species done negotiating. V. Loren's memories returned to a different Earth, vibrant, chaotic, full of promise. When humanity had first been invited to join the Galactic Empire a century ago, their scientific leaps and raw ingenuity had invigorated stagnant sectors. Their tech spread faster than their language. Their music and philosophies were studied in academies from the twin moons of Vyrix to the gas cities of Noral. But the Empire had never truly trusted them. It started with oversight, more frequent audits, restrictions on AI research, quiet censorship in the diplomatic channels. Then came the Resource Accord, a thinly veiled extraction contract disguised as cooperation. Humanity signed, reluctantly. V. Loren remembered Lila's face during the ceremony, unreadable but not defeated. She'd always been a quiet, sort of dangerous. The Real break came 3 months ago when a human data ship leaked internal Empire files, genetic experiments, planetary sterilizations, and the manipulation of time cycles on pre-FTL species. Crimes against every law the Empire claimed to uphold. The humans hadn't fabricated it. They didn't need to. Instead of applause, they received punishment, sanctions, surveillance fleets, and beneath it all, a heavy silence that said, "You were never truly one of us." Now Earth was withdrawing from the galactic stage not with rage, but with elegance. "Why won't they fight?" RHYX asked softly. "Because we expect them to," V. Loren replied. "And humanity's never been predictable." Beneath the calm of Earth's surface, inside the sunken city of Lusaka Prime, Lila stood before the last of the Exodus coordinators. The chamber buzzed softly with the resonance of darkwave engines powering their interstellar departure vessels. "They're still watching," murmured Nickel, a tall engineer with tired eyes. "They're waiting for a weapon." "We are the weapon," Lila said, "and we're choosing not to fire." Around them, architects of departure, physicists, historians, social theorists, finalized humanity's escape not as an act of cowardice, but clarity. Every algorithm had been run, every probability mapped. Staying led only to decay or war. Leaving, at least, allowed a new path. There were dissenters, of course, colonies that feared isolation, militants who wanted retribution. But the global vote had been decisive, 81% in favor of Exodus Protocol Theta. Not a retreat, an exit. She left the chamber without another word. The gravity of what they were doing no longer pressed on her. It lifted her with quiet momentum. For the first time in generations, humanity was acting without permission. Back in orbit, V. Loren, reviewed the final packet sent from Earth's diplomatic relay. It contained only data, one file with an encoded poem, human literature. It read, "There is no door you can close behind us, for we built the corridor. We do not knock to enter. We simply do not return." He didn't know what it meant entirely, but it haunted him. A private channel opened. The Empire High Council had convened. "We must send a blockade," said the first chair, a being of crystalline origin. "They cannot be allowed to take Empire-grade tech into unregulated space." V. Lauren responded slowly. "They built that tech, improved it, shared it freely until we gave them reason not to. They are part of the Empire." "They were," he corrected. The Council went silent. As Earth's last transmission faded, so too did its signature from known navigational grids. They had activated cloaking across their solar system, not to hide, but to sever. They weren't running. They were cutting ties. In a remote council chamber on Ixer, emissary RHYX drafted a final neutral observation. Humanity did not escalate. They withdrew. The Empire has mistaken silence for submission. Back on the Manthais, Valoran stood alone once more. Earth spun beneath him for only moments longer, then began to dim, not from shadow, but from something deeper, something engineered. An energy field swept outward like a curtain, folding space around it, obscuring what lay beneath. One by one, the stars around Sol blinked out of navigational charts. And then Earth was gone, not destroyed, not conquered, just absent. In the void that followed, V. Lauren whispered to the empty deck. "They didn't leave because they were defeated. They left because we made belonging impossible." And somewhere in that silence, the story of humanity entered a new chapter, one the Empire would not get to write. The skies above Earth were not dark, but determined. Thousands of vessels hovered in low orbit, arranged with geometric precision, each one a culmination of a century of hidden labor. They resembled no existing Empire design. Organic, silver-veined, and luminous with slow, pulsing light, they were both beautiful and defiant. Lila stood beneath the primary launch arc in Nairobi Basin, surrounded by silence too vast for words. The ground trembled with the vibrations of awakening engines, gravity calibrated to avoid environmental stress, yet still immense in scale. Her people moved like clockwork around her, but not mechanically. There was rhythm, purpose. They were dancing out of history. "Are you certain they won't intervene?" asked Aton, her deputy and oldest confidant. His voice was low, but taut with apprehension. "They've had 2 weeks," she replied, her eyes on the nearest departure craft. Unity's end. If they were going to strike, they'd have done it already. He frowned. "Maybe they're waiting for us to expose our full hand." Lila turned to him, her gaze steady. "This is our full hand. We're not hiding anything. That's what scares them." The vote had changed everything. 81%. Not just from Earth, but every major human colony within the Empire's reach. Mars, Europa, Icarian Prime, even the often disobedient Arceus Belt. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a refusal to participate further. When offered the broken architecture of Empire, humanity had chosen to walk away rather than remake it from within. They called it Exodus Protocol Theta. It wasn't sudden. The seeds had been planted when the first human diplomats realized their influence in the High Council was ornamental at best, when their cultural input was praised in speeches, but dismissed in policy, when their science was mined but their ethics ignored, when their own voice was used as justification for the Empire's sins, and when they dared to speak the truth, to reveal the atrocities swept under the glittering banners of order and progress. They were punished not for lying, but for being inconvenient. So they stopped asking. Within days of the vote, every human-aligned installation severed its extranet links, pulling back data cores and shutting down shared research. Transport lanes were cleared. Orbital stations were decommissioned. Civilian transport hubs were rerouted to deep space assembly ports. Still, there was no conflict. The Empire watched in confusion, then suspicion, then denial. Surely the humans would flinch, hesitate, misstep, but they didn't. They moved with the confidence of a species that no longer sought permission. Lila had been surprised by the coordination herself, not because it was flawless, but because it was willing. That was what had always made humanity dangerous. Not their technology, not their tempers, but their capacity to agree when it mattered most. Even the dissidents, those few who wanted to stay or who feared what lay beyond, had mostly chosen cooperation over chaos. There were moments of tension. She'd spoken with governors who feared irrelevance, with scientists who mourned abandoned research, with children who didn't understand why they had to leave their skies. But even then, the answer was simple. Because they couldn't grow in a cage. Aton handed her a holopad with the last data pulled from the outer colonies. Mars reports full evacuation. Last convoy launched 27 minutes ago. Jupiter's moons are sealed. The Oort jump beacon is live. All points clear. She exhaled not relief, but resolution. They'll expect a message, he said. They'll get one, Lila replied. Far above, on the outer deck of a neutral diplomatic station orbiting Pluto, emissary RHYX leaned over a tactical display, watching the slow drift of human vessels assembling beyond Pluto's heliopause. The ships were colossal, forming into concentric migration rings, powered by drive the Empire had never authorized and likely couldn't replicate. The technology bore signatures no one had seen before, part biological, part dark energy tethered, part something else. Valoran stood at the edge of the deck, arms folded. They never planned to fight. RHYX tilted his head. Did you want them to? No, Valoran said. I wanted them to ask us to come. They already did. We just didn't listen. The commander looked at the ships again. Why do I feel like we're watching the beginning of something we'll never understand? RHYX didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back on Earth, beneath Mount Kilimanjaro's newly minted arcology, Lila addressed the final assembly of planetary coordinators via direct neural link. They stood in shimmering holographic form across the chamber, faces tight with anticipation. No last-minute changes. She began. No extensions. All systems are in motion. When the window opens, we go. No exceptions. She scanned their faces. These were the people who had made the impossible real. Tunneling fusion lines beneath cities, building launch arcs in volcanic trenches, crafting new languages to code for physics humanity had only begun to grasp. Their loyalty hadn't been to flags or systems, but to the idea that they could be more. We don't launch because we are weak, she continued. We launch because this version of the galaxy can no longer contain us. We've tried to reform it. We've tried to coexist with its contradictions. But they demanded that we forget ourselves to remain welcome. And so, we leave not with fury, but with finality. There was no applause, only nods. In an instant, the link dissolved. She felt a small presence beside her, her daughter Mira, barely 12 years old, clutching an antique book, one of the last printed on Earth. Are we really leaving forever? Mira asked. Lila knelt, brushing a stray braid from her daughter's face. Not forever, she said, but for long enough that we remember who we are. Will they miss us? They'll miss what they thought they could control. That's different. Myra's grip tightened on the book. Tell me the ending again, she whispered. Lila smiled. We haven't written it yet. The final fleet formation completed just as Earth's artificial night fell, casting the planet in a soft, almost reverent darkness. One by one, the ships began to ascend, not with roaring engines, but with quiet elegance. The launch arcs bent open, gravity wells unfurling like petals, allowing the vessels to pass through the atmosphere without disturbing a single leaf. No one cheered. The Empire did not respond. Not a single warship moved. Perhaps they hoped this display of restraint would keep the door open. Perhaps they feared escalation. Or perhaps they realized, far too late, that the humans were not bluffing. At the edge of the system, the lead vessel paused. It sent one final burst toward the Empire's primary comms relay, a message carried not in words, but in harmonic code. When translated, it read, "We go not in anger, but in clarity. Do not follow." The message was unsigned. Then, like a curtain pulled tight, the fleet engaged their fold drives. Space twisted, not like a wound, but like an old scene being restitched, and the vessels vanished into a realm no Empire beacon could trace. Lauren watched from his post, the last signal fading from his screen. He did not move. He did not speak. Behind him, RHYX whispered, "They didn't abandon us. They left us behind." And the stars, for once, had no answer beyond the edge of map space. Past the dying signals of the Empire's reach, humanity began to weave its own constellation. The new spiral, as it would be called, was not defined by gravity or mass, but by thought, anchored not in stars, but in intention. Inside the command core of the flagship Peregrine Accord, Lila sat in a chamber of curved glass and memory metal, surrounded by silent bursts of color across the multidimensional display. Each cluster of light represented a newly seeded habitat, a thriving biosphere or a stabilized warp node. What had once been dreams etched into impossible blueprints were now tangible realities. But her focus wasn't on the numbers or the growth metrics. It was on the silence. They hadn't heard from the Empire in 9 months. Aton entered quietly, as he always did, his presence familiar and grounding. He handed her a data slate, its surface shifting with unread reports. "We confirm the decay of the Empire's outer expansion beacons. Most have gone dark. Their patrols have pulled inward. Defensive formations only. They're not pursuing." Lila didn't respond immediately. She watched one of the lights on the display blink green. Another successful terraforming initiation on Orbiter 6. "It feels too clean," she said finally. "Too final. Maybe they believe they've already won. Letting us leave was a punishment, not mercy." "No," she shook her head. "They don't understand what they lost." He took a seat beside her. "Some do. I've seen the messages. Not official. Just fragments. Scholars, old diplomats, scientists. Quiet regrets. They weren't allowed to respond. But they watched." She looked at him sharply. "You read them?" "I monitor them. Quietly. They don't breach protocols." Lila's gaze softened. She wasn't angry, only weary. "And what do they say?" Aton hesitated. "They ask if we'll come back." She turned her eyes to the stars again, as if listening for echoes. "Not yet." Elsewhere, on a drifting relay satellite within what had once been Empire-held neutral territory, a lone figure stood among forgotten comms relays. The creature's armor shimmered with old tech, its form gaunt yet regal. Lauren had left the council chambers months ago. Officially, he was on extended leave. In truth, he had not returned since the humans departed. He activated a terminal long dormant. The signals were faint but persistent. Human signatures embedded within time-locked communications. They pulsed in fractal rhythms that seemed designed to elude imperial decryption methods. RHYX had called them ghost codes, artifacts of a species too clever for straight lines. Lauren knew better. They were invitations, not to return to humans, but to understand them. He fed the latest sequence into the translation engine. The message was simple. No inheritance can substitute awakening. It wasn't even directed to the Empire. It was a reminder to themselves, a principle of their divergence. He felt no anger, only an unfamiliar grief. He had admired humanity, envied them, even in secret moments, not for their weaponry or stubbornness, but for their willingness to redefine themselves. The Empire had spent eons perfecting what it meant to be eternal. The humans had shown what it meant to evolve. On the colony of Harmonia, nestled inside the rings of a blue gas giant, Mira sat at the edge of a floating library node, reading the same book she carried from Earth. She was older now, taller, her features still curious but shaped by the silence of space. Children raised in a new spiral grew up surrounded by marvels their ancestors would never understand. Genetically tailored ecosystems, harmonic architecture that responded to emotion, education systems built on curiosity rather than compliance. But she still read the printed words. Lila found her there, bare feet tucked beneath her, humming softly to the page. "You always read the same passage," Lila said. Mira looked up, smiling. "It changes every time." "That's not how books work." "It is," Mira said, tapping her head. "Because I change." Lila sat beside her. "They'll ask again soon." Mira didn't need to ask who they were. "Will we answer?" Not the way they want. Then how? Lila turned her face toward the glass sky. Outside, the stars twisted in unfamiliar patterns, not random, but mapped to human instinct and hope. By thriving, she said, by becoming something they cannot follow. Mira closed the book. That sounds like loneliness. It's freedom. Mira was silent for a long moment. Do you think they'll survive without us? Lila hesitated. They'll endure, but I'm not sure they'll grow. Back within the Empire's core, the Council gathered in an emergency session, though they no longer called them such. Emergency implied the unexpected. By now, the slow unraveling was familiar. Trade deficits, diplomatic failures, cultural stalling. The human exodus had left a vacuum, not just of population, but of possibility. They were one system. The Minister of Order protested. How did their absence destabilize so much? They were not one system, another corrected. They were many, and they connected others. They were a threat, came a colder voice. Unpredictable, chaotic. They broke protocols. They built dreams, whispered a younger delegate. We just didn't like the price. Silence followed. The truth had been spoken, and it settled like ash. V. Lauren entered the chamber then, unannounced. He no longer held position, but his presence still carried weight. They did not break, he said. They outgrew. The ministers shifted uncomfortably. They did not leave because they hated us. They left because we would not change, because we demanded obedience without reflection, progress without soul. And what would you have done? One asked, voice sharp with accusation. Listened, V. Lauren replied, even once. He turned and left, leaving behind silence that spoke louder than decree. In the shipyard to Caldera, a new vessel prepared for launch. Unlike those before it, this ship bore no markings of home, no emblem of Earth or colony. Its hull was a blend of stone and light, carved with symbols of transition. Mira stood at its helm, no longer a child. This was not a return mission. It was not a bridge back. It was a step forward to find others, to listen for signals lost time, to extend the spiral outward. Lila watched from the platform, her expression unreadable. Pride, worry, hope, all woven together. You don't have to go, she said softly. I do, Mira replied, because they never did. Lila nodded once. The ship lifted without sound, threading through the orbital latticework and vanishing into the mist of unknown stars. Humanity had not merely left. They had begun. The artifact hovered in the vacuum between worlds, spinning slowly on a gravitational axis no Empire physicist could decipher. Roughly spherical, its surface rippled with mirrored filaments that refracted starlight like water catching fire. The retrieval team approached with caution, guided by protocols once used for derelict war relics. But this object was no remnant of conflict. It pulsed with serenity. Inside the command deck of the Imperial cruiser Vigilant Path, RHYX watched the feed with attention that had grown familiar. The years since the human exodus had dulled the Empire's dominance. New species resisted assimilation. Old allies faltered. And in the void left behind, uncertainty grew like mold. What is it transmitting? Asked Commander Telex, his voice edged with a soldier's weariness. No known language, RHYX replied, but the frequency matches human harmonic patterns. The commander raised an eyebrow. Are they trying to reestablish contact? I don't think so. This isn't a message to us. Then why leave it here? RHYX paused. Maybe they didn't. Maybe we just caught up. On the colony of Aurelian, one of the furthest settlements in the new spiral, Mira paced the edge of a cliffside observatory, watching a star blink in unnatural rhythm. She wore a cloak of woven composite fibers, both tradition and tech, resistant to the chill but light as memory. The cliff overlooked a misty ocean of electric blue, roiling beneath a sky where twin moons drifted in tight embrace. A quiet chime pulsed in her neural band, a message encrypted, older than her current location. Mira tapped the signal with her mind, and the air in front of her shimmered. Lila's face appeared, holographic, serene. You'll find an outpost beyond the Karen Drift. We left a gate there, buried beneath the ring wall. Not for retreat, for resonance. Something's calling. I think it wants to be found. The image faded. Mira stood still for a moment, wind tugging at her cloak. Then she turned and walked toward the launch deck. The path ahead was not backward, but it circled the truth. The outpost was not much to look at. An ancient scaffold of polished stone and engineered vines, half collapsed into the landscape of a dead planet. Time had worked its quiet chaos across the structure. But beneath it, the gate pulsed with dormant power, still warm from the hands that built it. Mira stepped forward, her team close behind. There was no security, no traps, just a panel etched in a script known only to those born after Earth's silence. She pressed her palm to it. The gate breathed. In a moment, the world folded, not torn, not forced, but allowed. The space around her reshaped itself into a corridor of living memory. She recognized nothing, yet felt everything. The sense of standing within her own legacy. They passed through. They arrived in a system untouched by known charts. 6 stars orbiting one another in a cosmic dance of balance. At its center, a hollow planet cradled a constructive crystalline architecture that bent physics around elegance. No distress signal. No caution. Just stillness. Life signs. Mira asked. Ambiguous, replied Jun, her lead xenologist. Nothing we recognize as baseline carbon biologic, but something exists everywhere. They disembarked. Inside the structure, they found a gallery. Massive walls bore images, not painted, but woven from light and gravity. Murals of Earth, Mars, ancient Africa, floating schools over Europa, then scenes beyond the Exodus. New worlds, new languages, cities shaped like constellations. And then the Empire, not as enemy, but as mirror. Mira stood transfixed. The gallery was not a warning or a vault. It was a memory offered. What is this place? Jin whispered. A story, Mira said. Ours. A low hum echoed through the structure. Not hostile. An invitation. They followed the resonance deeper into the core. There, they found the central mind, not artificial in the sense of Empire AI, not bound by machine, a consciousness layered in organic computation, a vessel for memory and empathy, human in origin, but no longer only human. It addressed Mira not with voice, but with feeling. You left to become. You returned to connect. Mira closed her eyes. We didn't expect you to wait. We did not wait. We grew. We watched. And when we were ready, we listened. The team around her stepped back as the chamber brightened. The mind shifted, offering more than knowledge. A map. No, a seed. The beginning of something vaster than migration. An alliance. Not with the Empire, but with what came next. Back in the remains of the Empire's central archive, V. Lauren sat in the dark. The lights had failed weeks ago. No one bothered to fix them. He tapped through dying interfaces, looking for records that no longer updated. Then something changed. A single new entry. Origin, unknown. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a broadcast. It was an open frequency. Not addressed to the Empire. Not addressed to anyone. Just available. He played it. A young voice, calm and clear. Not triumphant. Not accusing. We are not returning. But we are open. We do not seek conquest. We offer presence. If you still believe in becoming, meet us between. Then silence. V. Lauren closed his eyes. Not hope. Not yet. But the first step. In the cathedral-like halls of a spiral assembly ship, Mira prepared for transit. Delegates gathered, some human, some no longer quite. No empires here. Just shared breath and chosen paths. Aton stood beside her, older, his face lined with years of movement. They'll come, he said. Not all, she replied. Enough. She looked into the void ahead, not empty, but full of stories yet unspoken. Let's begin again, Mira said, and the stars answered.